I don't have biology open. Why not? Good afternoon. How's everybody? Oops. Got to click on sound. Hope you're staying warm. All right. While we're waiting for everybody to get in, check to see that you have no missing assignments out. And we're going to look at asexual reproduction and binary fission today. If you're all done, take a look at this unit in Canvas. All right, there were two parts to this video, and I think we watched the first one. I'm not sure that I did that with both classes, so we're going to watch both of them again today, being as it's been a while since we uh, looked at this. While we wait for the latecomers.
Reproduction means producing more of the same type of organism. People having babies, plants producing seeds, and bacteria dividing are all examples of reproduction. There are two main types, sexual and asexual. In summary, sexual reproduction involves two parents, each one providing a reproductive cell which combines with the other parent's reproductive cell to produce a new, unique cell, which can develop into a complete organism. Asexual reproduction, on the other hand, requires only one parent, and all the offspring are genetic clones of that parent. Let's look at them both in a little more detail. Under most circumstances, animals reproduce by sexual reproduction. An egg cell from the female fuses with a sperm cell from the male. These reproductive cells, The egg and sperm cells are known as gametes, and this process of fusion to form a new cell is called fertilization. It's worth noting here that the spelling of fertilization depends on which type of English you use. Now, like all cells, the gametes contain DNA, the genetic instructions that make us who we are. During fertilization, the DNA of each parent combines, meaning that when the cells fuse, they produce a new, unique cell with a combination of the DNA of each parent. This new cell is called a zygote. The zygote then divides millions upon millions of times and develops into a new organism. The same general process happens in flowering plants. They have male and female gametes which combine to produce a zygote. The male gametes of flowers are found in pollen grains, while the female gametes are found in the ovules. A fertilized ovule develops into a seed, which can develop into a new plant. Unlike sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction involves one parent producing offspring which have DNA that is identical to that parent's.
All right, I pause it there because this is the focus of the lesson today, the asexual reproduction part. So the first part was more for review. So pay particular attention to this. There will be a worksheet after we watch the two videos.
DNA. Let's look at a few examples in plants. Some plants produce runners. These are basically long stems that grow horizontally. In certain points along the runner, new vertical stems and roots can form. If separated from the parent plant, these new stem and root systems, the daughter plants, can exist independently. Here you can see a strawberry plant with a runner stem and its daughter plants. Tubers are another method. Tubers are basically just modified plant stems or roots acting as a storage of food for the plant. Potatoes are a really common example of tubers. If you've ever left potatoes for too long before eating them, you might have noticed they grow little green shoots on them. This happens to potatoes in the ground too, and these new stems can grow into new independent plants. Since they ultimately came from a single parent plant, they have the same DNA and are genetically identical to that parent. Another example is bulbs. These are another type of modified stem, again providing a storage of food. Onions are a well-known example of plant bulbs. A single bulb can produce daughter bulbs, which can each grow into separate, genetically identical plants. All of the examples of asexual reproduction in plants outlined so far are natural, meaning they can occur in nature without any human involvement. But humans sometimes use artificial methods of asexual reproduction in plants if the plant is useful to us for food, medicine, etc. With some plants, you can take cuttings. This basically means cutting off a small section of a plant and putting it in the soil. The cutting will form roots and exist as an independent plant. Another method is micropropagation. This is a big topic that deserves a video of its own, but in summary, it involves taking plant tissue from one plant in sterile laboratory conditions and allowing it to grow into new plants with the help of nutrients and hormones. Back to natural examples, plants aren't the only organisms that reproduce asexually. Bacteria reproduce by a single bacterium cell dividing to produce two daughter cells, each one genetically identical to the original parent cell. This is called binary fission. Yeasts are another example. They can reproduce using a technique called budding. This is where a daughter cell, the bud, forms from the parent cell. It has identical DNA to the parent cell and will separate to live as an independent cell. Even some animals can reproduce asexually. For example, certain species of starfish are able to remove a part of their body. Both separate sections of body can then regrow the missing section, leaving two genetically identical individuals from the original one. Both sexual and asexual reproduction have their advantages, but that's all presented in the next video.
Alright. So we are going to look at the next one. Alright, so just keep those in mind. Like I said, we are going to do a worksheet afterwards. So Oop.
To gain anything from this video, you need to understand both sexual and asexual reproduction. I'll be using all of the words you see here, and I'm assuming you understand them already. If any of this is new to you, you should go back and watch the previous video that introduces all of this. As a quick recap, sexual reproduction involves two parents, each one providing a reproductive cell called a gamete, which combines with the other parent's gamete to produce a new, unique cell called a zygote, which can divide and develop into a complete organism. Asexual reproduction, on the other hand, requires only one parent, and all the offspring are genetic clones of that parent. Amongst plants, animals, fungi, and protoctists, you will find examples of species that can reproduce either sexually or asexually, and many that can do both. All species of bacteria and archaea, however, can only reproduce asexually.
My heart going boom, boom, boom. Hey, he said, grab your things, I want to take you home. Come on, take me home, back home.
Here, we're focusing on the advantages of each type of reproduction. Sexual reproduction has the advantage of providing genetic variation within a population, and so the populations are more likely to survive in changing environments. Asexual reproduction is more time efficient. It requires less energy and doesn't rely on an individual being able to find a mate, meaning populations can grow quickly and survive if the environment is stable. This video will describe and explain the relevance of these ideas. Let's start with the genetic variation that arises from sexual reproduction. Like all cells, gametes contain DNA. Whether we're talking about egg and sperm cells from animals, or the gametes found in pollen and ovules in flowering plants, they all contain the parent organism's DNA. DNA is the genetic information that codes for the features of a living organism. How tall a plant is, the shape of a fish's fins, the strong muscles in a lion's legs. Most features are determined, at least in part, by an organism's DNA. When these DNA-containing gametes fuse during fertilization, the DNA of each parent is combined in the zygote. You may think that this would result in the offspring having double the amount of DNA, because they now have their father's DNA plus their mother's DNA. But that's not correct. In fact, in order for the new organism to have the correct amount of DNA, each gamete contains a random half of the DNA of the parent. When these two halves combine, they provide one complete set of DNA in the new cell, which then divides and develops into a new individual. Exactly which bits of the DNA make up the half portion within each gamete is quite random. If we compare the DNA in two egg cells from the same female, they would each have a different combination of DNA. No two egg cells provided by one female contain the same DNA. No two sperm cells provided by one male contain the same DNA. Each gamete is genetically unique. So, if the same two parents have more than one child, each one will be genetically unique. There is zero possibility that two separate instances of fertilization will produce two children that are genetically identical. No two sisters contain exactly the same DNA. No two brothers contain exactly the same DNA.
It's not a pointer.
Obviously, you're thinking, what about identical twins? This happens when an egg and sperm cell form a single zygote in a single instance of fertilization. Early in development, the newly forming collection of cells divides into two. Each collection of cells goes on to form two genetically identical individuals. This is a rare occurrence, and it doesn't change the fact that sexual reproduction produces lots of genetically unique individuals. In sexual reproduction, new generations are produced from multiple sets of parents, each offering unique combinations of DNA. All individuals in the new generation will be genetically unique from each other and from their parents. I'll say it again, sexual reproduction produces lots of genetically unique individuals. This is true for every type of organism that reproduces using sexual reproduction. A flowering plant population, for example, will also have genetic variation if reproducing sexually. So what, you might ask? Well, imagine the conditions in the environment change. Let's say these plants live in a location where the winter temperature reaches as low as 5 degrees Celsius. This population is used to that, and most of these plants can survive a minimum temperature of 5 degrees. But remember that none of these individuals are the same. They're all genetically unique. Maybe some of them have the genetic instructions that provide features that allow them to survive at lower temperatures. There may be some that can only survive at higher minimum temperatures, and these individuals are unlikely to survive even an average winter. But now let's say there is a particularly cold season and the temperature drops to 2 degrees Celsius, below what this species is used to. The cold temperatures may kill off many of the individuals, but since all of these individuals are unique, some can survive these colder conditions. As a result of genetic variation, the population is more likely to survive. Notice that genetic variation does not necessarily make each individual more likely to survive changing conditions. It makes the population as a whole more likely to survive. Changing climate, changing food supplies, diseases, the introduction of new predators are all examples of possible changes in the environment that a population may need to be prepared for.
Grab your things, I want to take
I
you
just love these commercials.
Looking at asexual reproduction, remember that each individual produced from a single parent is a genetic clone of the parent. If this population of plants were produced from a single individual via asexual reproduction, they would all be equally at risk of environmental changes. This population is less resistant to environmental change because any change in conditions that kills one individual is more likely to kill all of them. But asexual reproduction is not all bad. Firstly, for sexual reproduction to happen, individuals need to find a mate. Male and female animals must find each other and mate, and sometimes complicated mating rituals are involved. In addition, gametes must be produced in order for fertilization to take place. In the case of flowering plants, the plants obviously must produce flowers, sometimes with large colourful petals and nectar to attract insects. Again, just like in animals, gametes must also be produced. And don't forget fruit and seed development. All of this takes time and energy. In general, the time taken to produce mature offspring via asexual reproduction is much shorter than when using sexual reproduction. So, asexual reproduction is a better way of colonizing an area quickly, assuming conditions are right. So just to reiterate the main points, sexual reproduction has the advantage of providing genetic variation within a population, and so the populations are more likely to survive in changing environments. Asexual reproduction is more time efficient. It requires less energy and doesn't rely on finding a mate, meaning populations can grow quickly and survive if the environment is stable.
Okay, that's a question that is frequently asked. What is the advantage and disadvantage of those two types of reproduction? So make sure that you have that under your belt. All right, I am going to put an assignment up for this section. So we're going to look at binary fission. And so this is, when we say asexual reproduction, basically this is mitosis, where the cell simply divides up the information in the cell and creates 2 new cells. It does that in plants and it does that in animals. There's 2 different ways. Conjugation is a different way that bacteria divide, where they simply inject a certain amount of their DNA information into a new cell. Whereas binary fission is exactly like mitosis, where the information is, if you look at these steps right here, let me make my screen bigger to make sure you can see what I'm doing. All right, follow my arrow. All right, so this is exactly like mitosis, where you have the cell and interphase, and you have PMAT where it's getting ready. Then you have the information pulling to opposite sides of the cell, and then the cell dividing in 2. This one is more like plants. They create, as they pinch in the middle, they create a bar or a plate that separates one side from the other. But eventually you're going to end up with 2 identical cells. Okay. You can, when I click on this, it's going to create a document that you have to open, but I suggest that you do that. Okay. So read this page over, and I'm going to upload and review this. So while I'm doing that, make sure that your other documents are in. Only half of you have done your cancer paper. So make sure that you've done. Oh, speaking of which, I did add, hold on, I did add a picture to the assignment that will help you answer the question. All right, question number 4. I think I went over it with this class yesterday, but let me see, can I make this bigger? All right, the question asks you to compare the ABCs of benign and malignant moles. All right, those are, so you have the word benign on one side and malignant on the other side. And they want you to look at these 2 pictures. Let me do this it might be a little bigger if I do this student view. Not really, but anyway. Okay, there we go. Make it bigger. Okay, so the ABCs have to do with symmetry, the border, the color, and the diameter. So on those lines, you want to, and they have those words up at the top, you want to look at each picture. So if it's benign, they are symmetrical. That means they are the same all the way around. If it's malignant, then it's irregular. The size is not consistent all the time. It's irregular. So also all you can say is symmetrical or asymmetrical. Those are 2 words you can use. Or you can say round and irregular. Those are 2 other words you can use. All right, the next column says border. The border is irregularly notched or blurred. So this one is a smooth border, and this one is one that's irregular. Okay, so again, looking at the 2 columns, you have benign and malignant. Color, in benign, the color is consistent, or it's the same, or uniform. Those are all words you can use. For malignant, you can use multicolored or irregular colored. Okay. For diameter, you can say small or larger than 6 millimeters. So benign would be small, malignant would be larger than 6 centimeters, 6 millimeters, sorry. Okay. All right, so that is the answer for number 4. So don't leave that blank. You have this picture to help you. You don't have E on your chart, but E involves how the mold evolves, how it changes over time. Right. Usually if you catch it early, They remove it and that's fine. So that's from moles. And then they spread. Okay. But you're concerned with the A, B, C, D. So that is the answer for that worksheet. All right. So like I said, there's quite a few of you who have still not turned that in. Turn that in. And if you have turned it in, then go back and read the section on binary and non-binary fission. And I am posting an assignment momentarily. As soon as I do attendance. I did note that two of y'all came in late while we were watching the video. Again, you're reminded that we're finishing. This is the end of this unit. So next week we'll be reviewing and testing. So go back and look at all of the topics in this section. And that looks like an interesting. And that's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Those are STEAM. So that's an interesting event to go to. You should try to go. All right. That being said, on your desktop and in the module, you'll have the assignment for asexual reproduction. Okay. So you can refer back to the sections in Canvas. All right. So you pull up the worksheet. You've got some reading to do. So they just remind you, like the video did, of what asexual reproduction means. And then they give you different types. So we have cuttings, as he showed you in the video. We have budding. We have binary fission and sporing. He didn't talk much about spores, but spores, if you've noticed certain fern plants, they have those little dots under the leaf. Those are spores. And so when those spores fall off, they reproduce more organisms like the other, but they are exactly the same as the parent plant. All right, so you've got some information to read. You've got some, like he had on the video, the advantages and disadvantages. And then you have some questions to answer. Okay, so read, answer the questions, send it back. All right. So again, this is reading. They give you information. You've got to read and then answer the questions. Okay, so this is in your module as well as it is on the, so it's right after bacteria where you have that information as well to look at. So if you go from that page to this page, you will find the assignment. Okay, so again, read the top part and then answer the 13 questions that follow. So this reading is up to here, and then you have questions. You can highlight or circle the answer. That would be appreciated.
Wait, on the very top part, is it just rating?
Yes, it is. I'm gonna pull it up again. So we just had someone come look
Uh,
at.
on where the question is, do I have to fill in that blank?
Okay, let's pull it up again. Okay. Which question are you referring to?
The very bottom page, the middle one. That blank right there in the box. Do I have to put
No,
another
no,
disadvantage?
no. There is,
Uh,
that's just as many disadvantages as they have.
all right.
Okay. All right. So
Thank you.
again, folks, you're welcome. All of this is reading. Start here. You read. Look at the pictures. And then they give you the advantage of sexual reproduction and the disadvantages. They summarize, comparing them side by side. Okay. Then you have to just simply answer the 13 questions, highlight or circle the letter of the answer, and then send it back. All right, so again, this is an empty box in that there are more advantages of sexual reproduction than there are disadvantages. Okay, that's just an empty box. Okay, Neve, I'll look at that right now. Good job. And again, those of you who didn't turn in your cancer review, I gave you the answers today. So if you were paying attention, you could have just been filling that in so that you can get that turned in today, because that's going to be late. You don't want assignments to start piling up on you. And usually, if you don't get 100 on it, I usually reassign it. So take advantage of the fact that you can go back and fix it and resubmit. Thank you, Neve.
Miss Hurst.
Yes.
Is this like a quiz? Like you can't help us?
No, you can. I can help you.
Mm. Wouldn't number 7 reproduce asexually through a spore formation?
Mm,
I need to go get my touchscreen. Dang. Something.
all right. Um, A A is going to look like two cells dividing into two. So which one of those words says I'm making two cells? All right. Let me go back to all right. It looks like this. So it's gonna be binary fission. Okay. Spores are going to be little little things that grow on the leaf. Like I said, if you've ever seen a fern plants have these little dots on the bottom of them. Those are the spores. And those are actually their reproductive cells.
So that will be on like a mushroom, like the little dots.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. All those little folds underneath a mushroom, they have spores in them.
Like
Mm-hmm. And I like the way you asked the question out loud, so hopefully everybody else was listening. Thank you for that. All right, folks, we got 5 minutes left. 5 minutes to ask a question before you got to go. And number 13 appears to have two right answers. So keep that in mind. If you check the chart, number 13 has two right answers. Okay, that one.
Would um, vegetative reproduction happen with a leaf because it grows into like a new plant?
It could, yeah. If you're taking it, yes, it could. Is that a choice? So
Yeah, for number 9, it's number 8, letter A.
for D. Um, for number 9, let's see. Yeah, for the leaf, yes. I know, because that's not a fern. That's not a fern plant. That's a leaf from a tree. So yes, I do that all the time. I have a whole collection of plants across my window, and I I'm always taking a piece off of one, putting it in water, growing some roots, and then once it grows roots, I put it in some dirt, and it grows into a whole new plant. Okay, folks, time's up. So find a good place to stop, and I will see you next week. Have a good weekend. Stay warm. Thank you.